Hello and welcome to Monster Monday. On today's episode, we're going to take a look at the Harpy. That sucked. I want to do that again, Dave. Do you enjoy taking glee in suffering and death? If so, perhaps you're a Harpy. So guys, the Harpy is not a rare creature. Harpies have been around since the early days of D&D. If you're following along in your 5th edition Monster Manual, I am on page 181. But you may also notice that I have 2 books with me because sometimes I look at older books to compare the ecology of different D&D creatures and how they're different. So let's start off with 5th and then we'll take a glance back into a little bit history there. The Harpy is a creature, a sadistic creature. Its sweet song has lured countless adventurers to their deaths, drawing them in close for the Harpy to kill and then consume. These are predators, mental note. They have songs, mental note. A Harpy combines the body, legs, and wings of a vulture with the torso, arms, and head of a human. Its wicked talons and bone club make it a formidable threat in combat, and its eyes reflect the absolute evil of its soul. Okay, so this is a weird mythological hybrid creature who lures prey and then devours them. Yay, a fantastic encounter. Long ago, an elf wandering a forest heard bird song so pure and wholesome that she was moved to tears. Following the music, she came upon a clearing where stood a handsome elf youth who had also paused to hear the bird's song. This was Fenmarel Mestarine, a reclusive elf god. His divine presence stole her heart as he fled, vanishing into the woods as if he was never there. Though the elf searched the woods and called for her stranger, she found no sign of his passage. Driven to despair by her longing, she begged the gods to help her. Adriphania, elf goddess of the sky, heard the elf's cries and was moved to her aid. She appeared as the bird whose song had entranced the outcast god, then taught that song of beauty and seduction to the elf. When her singing failed to draw Fenmarel Mestarine to her side, the elf cursed the gods, invoking a dreadful power and transforming her into the first Harpy. The curse worked its magic on the elf's spirit as well as her body, turning her desire for love into a hunger for flesh, even as her beautiful song continued to draw creatures to her deadly embrace. That is a whole couple paragraphs of flavor text. And sometimes when we're looking at monsters, the books provide us with like an actual background or a mythology that explains the origins of said creature. Oftentimes, it's not that elaborate, but this actually references very specific instances. Like that's basically like a short mythological tale. Now, this is where I like to break out into other books. So if I'm looking here at the older Monster Manual from 3rd, 3.5, the Harpy has, first of all, it starts off with a stat block, and then it goes into a brief description. A more malignant and wretched creature than the Harpy is difficult to imagine. Taking great glee in causing suffering and death, the sadistic Harpy is always watching for new victims. A Harpy resembles an evil-faced old human with the lower body, legs, and wings of a bird-like dinosaur. Its hair is tangled and filthy, crusted with the blood of its victims. A Harpy's coal-black eyes clearly reflect its evil soul, as do the wicked talons on its knotty fingers. These vile creatures wear no clothing and often wield large, heavy bones as though they were clubs. Harpies like to entrance hapless travelers with their magical songs and lead them to unspeakable torments. Only when a Harpy has finished playing with its new toys will it release them from suffering by killing and consuming them. The rest of the description for this creature involves its abilities in combat, which include captivating song, breath weapon, cone of fire. Yeah. No, wait, I'm sorry. Just combat, the captivating song. That breath weapon thing is part of the Hellhound block. So, kind of interesting that in this older edition, it's more about the creature and how it acts and what it can do, and less about a background story. There's like no narrative in here. None of these elf references. So kind of just an interesting comparison. Let's take a look, though, back on the 5th edition description for the Harpy Song. To hear a Harpy Song is to hear music more beautiful than anything else in the world. Again, this reference to the importance of the music and the luring song and it being amazingly beautiful. A traveler that succumbs to the entrancing effect of that singing is compelled to blunder toward its source. A harpy sometimes charms victims before it attacks, but a more effective use of its song is to lure prey over cliffs, into bogs and quicksand, or into deadly pits. Creatures trapped or incapacitated then become easy targets for the harpy's wrath. Sadistic cowards. Harpies haunt bleak coastal cliffs and other places hazardous to non-flying creatures. Harpies have no interest in a fair fight, and they never attack unless they have a clear advantage. If a fight turns against a harpy, it lacks the cunning to adapt and will flee and go hungry rather than risk straight-up combat. When they attack, harpies play with their food, delighting in the music their victims make as they scream. A harpy takes its time dismembering a helpless foe and can spend days torturing a victim before the merciful end. Gruesome collectors. Harpies take shiny baubles, valuable objects, and other trophies from their victims, sometimes fighting with each other for the right to claim the choicest prizes. When no valuable objects can be found, a harpy takes hair, bones, or body parts to line its nest. A harpy's lair is usually hidden in remote ruins, where adventurers can discover valuable treasure and magic hidden beneath foul piles of offal. So there's a lot more in there. Now again, when it mentions where they usually live, I want to flip back to this 3rd edition version, because in the stat block, underneath the stat block, one of the things that I do like that they kind of kept short and sweet in the older editions in the stat block is climate and terrain. So it kind of gives you at a reference, without having to read that whole paragraph about where they live, it kind of gives you at a glance, temperate and warm land and underground. That's odd. So why would a 3rd edition harpy be listed as temperate and warm land underground, and then 5th edition they become these creatures who kind of hang out in more remote areas? My gut instinct is that the harpy description in terms of their climate and terrain in 5th edition is probably more in line with overall harpy mythology. I think maybe 3rd edition was a little sloppy to add that in. Now, 3rd edition has a whole couple paragraphs about this whole captivating song. I'm going to read that first, and then we're going to jump back to 5th edition, so stay with me. When a harpy engages in battle, it prefers to use flyby attack and strike with a melee weapon. Captivating song. The most insidious ability of the harpy is its song. When a harpy sings, all creatures other than harpies within a 300-foot spread must succeed at a will save DC 15 or become utterly captivated. This is a sonic, mind-affecting charm. If the save is successful, that creature cannot be affected again by that harpy's song for 1 day. A captivated victim walks towards the harpy, taking the most direct route available. If the path leads into a dangerous area through flame, off a cliff, etc., that creature gets a second saving throw. Captivated creatures can take no actions other than to defend themselves. Thus, a fighter cannot run away or attack, but suffers no defensive penalties. A victim within 5 feet of the harpy stands there and offers no resistance to the monster's attacks. The effect continues for as long as the harpy sings. A bard's countersong ability allows the captivated creature to attempt a new save. Interesting. Mechanically interesting, but I also think functionally interesting in terms of how a harpy would initiate their hunt, their lure, and then their strategy. So let's compare this to the very small chunk called Luring Song here in the stat block on page 181 of the 5th edition Monster Manual. The harpy sings a magical melody. Every humanoid and giant within 300 feet of the harpy that can hear that song must succeed on a DC 11 wisdom save or be charmed until the song ends. Huh. DC 15 is significantly higher than DC 11. So this, as a DM, then I'm thinking like, why? Why is this different? Why is the 5th edition creature listed as a challenge rating 1? Harpies are challenge rating 1. And in 3rd, they're listed as challenge rating 4. Now, I mean, I know there's some mechanical conversion between editions, which I'm sure like that's immediately what you guys are saying in your minds or out loud as you're watching this. I get that. But let's think about the why. Why was this creature scaled differently? So they have approximately the same hit dice between 3rd edition, so it's 78 hit dice, 78 plus 7. So actually more hit points in 5th on average, 78 plus 7 in 5th edition. Their flying speed's about the same. No, I'm sorry. 20 foot and fly 80 foot in 3rd edition. In 5th edition, it's 20 and 40. So I'm getting the vibe that they're a little more badass in 3rd edition because that 15 DC save versus their song is much more challenging than an 11. Okay, so one of the things that might be a little bit different slash a factor to consider mechanically is that in 3rd edition, they had a feat that allowed them to do a flyby attack. And really that's not precisely accounted for in 5th edition. They have flight. With the 5th edition rules, I suppose they could fly, attack, and fly away. So that's equivalently a flyby attack without making it a flyby attack, I guess. So the Harpy makes 2 attacks, one with its claws and one with its club. The claws are +3 to hit, 2d4 plus 1 damage. The club is +3 to hit, 1d4 plus 1 bludgeoning damage. Why wouldn't they just use 2 claws? I think the club is kind of stupid. I mean, from a DM perspective, if I wanted to scale up a Harpy and make them a little more deadly, I would just do the 2 claw attacks because it's 2d4 plus 1, so you're going to do more damage on average than you would with 1 claw and 1 club. And physiologically, there's no reason why they couldn't strafe and rake and fly away. Okay, I'm still a little bit bothered by the differences between the song. So in the 3rd edition, you had an initial save that you had to make that was DC 15. In this one, it's DC 11, or you're charmed until the song ends. The Harpy must take a bonus action on its subsequent turns to continue singing. It can stop singing at any time. The song ends if the Harpy is incapacitated. All right, while charmed by the Harpy, a target is incapacitated and ignores the songs of other Harpies. If the charmed target is more than 5 feet away from the Harpy, the target can take the dash action on its turn to move toward the Harpy by the most direct route. It doesn't avoid opportunity attacks, but before moving into damaging terrain, such as lava or a pit, and whenever it takes damage from a source other than the Harpy, a target can repeat the saving throw. A creature can also repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns. If a creature's saving throw is successful, the effect ends on it. A target then that successfully saves is immune to this Harpy's song for the next 24 hours. I feel like, based on all of this information, that the 5th edition Harpy is a challenge rating 1 because it's weaker. It is inferior to a 3rd edition Harpy for multiple reasons. Basically, in 5th edition, as long as the harpy's singing, like you can make another check every round. Whereas in 3rd edition, you got the initial check. And then only if you were going to take life-threatening damage by jumping off a cliff or falling in a pit, then you got an additional check. But assuming that you failed both of those checks, you're done for in 3rd edition. That harpy had you under its trance, under its song. Whereas in 5th, it's like every round you can make a save. I don't like that. All right, so what do we do with this? What's the point of Monster Monday? It's to look at monsters, but also come up with ideas for how to use them in encounters and adventures. And I'm going to tell you guys right now that I would have no problem running a game for a bunch of low-level noobs with Harpy as an encounter, okay? So here's an easy one. You're sending the party on a boat to go to some island to explore the island because there's something there. Insert whatever you want, a lost civilization, ruins, a rare archaeological excavation going on, whatever you want, right? Maybe just some jungles that are rumored to have treasures, whatever. Harpies are something that you could throw at a party when they're first getting to an island. Harpies are something that you could have near an old abandoned castle or some ruins kind of near a cliff or near the mountains. Basically, I think of them as anywhere where these things could nest. Even forgetting mountains and cliffs, this conceivably could be an ancient forest encounter. You can have harpies have their nests way up high in these old like redwoods or something. Okay, so basically anything where the party's coming to an area where conceivably these things could have nests. Caves, cliffs, mountains, really, really tall trees, old abandoned castles, ruins, whatever. And you can have a harpy there, one. And that harpy could do its song. And you don't reveal it as a harpy, you play it out as they hear a song. So what I would do is tie that into whatever the overall adventure is to kind of fool the party into thinking that the song they're hearing is somehow related to what they're actually being sent to do or what they're actually going on the adventure for. So for example, if they're going to explore some old abandoned castle and they hear this song, it's going to be bewildering. They might not immediately assume it's a harpy. They might assume that it's a ghost. They might assume that it's like a banshee or something like that. If they're somewhere along, cliffs or near an ocean and they hear this, maybe they'll think it's a harpy. Maybe they'll think it's a siren. There are a lot of different options there. You could even have the song be something that they've heard before. So, we all know like parrots, for example, certain birds can mimic, right? They can mimic sounds, they can mimic people's voices. So maybe these harpies heard a song that was like popular to sea travelers and they mimicked that song. And now the party thinks that it's a group of sailors who are having some kind of a gathering on the beach or up the hill from the beach, just over the rocks. But whatever it is, you could have them kind of faintly hearing this song from wherever they're coming. And then once they get within, the 300 feet, then you have them make the save. Now, I do think that it's fair if you have somebody, who actively says as a player, before they hit that 300-foot threshold, if a player hears something in the distance and they're suspicious, and they want to make an Arcana roll, and they actively say like, can I make an Arcana check to determine if this is a magical song or something? I think that's fair. But you still don't say like, as a DM, you wouldn't go like, oh, you made your check. Yeah, it's definitely a harpy singing. You could describe it vividly in some fashion, saying, for example, I would say something like, the tune seems somewhat haunting to you and has somewhat of a mystical lure, but you don't feel it necessarily drawing you in from this distance. Or maybe you say like, well, it seems sort of ethereal and magical, but yet it seems far away. But if you get closer, you might be able to hear it better. Now, that could also be, a dual-edged blade, because then you've just given them a hint that something could be bad. Something bad could be coming. Okay, another way that you can include this in an encounter is by doing a little trick that you call the setup. So you set up whatever encounter wherever they are. Let's say it's the beach landing on the island. Let's say they've already gone into the island, or let's say they're just somewhere on the continent exploring, and you have them hear some music, and then you actually have them encounter like a group of a few bards. And the bards are like totally harmless NPCs, just travelers, not meant to be a big encounter. But now, like, the bards invite them to sit down and enjoy a song and stuff. And then, they enjoy a meal and they talk a little bit. And then the bards part way, they leave, right? But you make that bard have like a really beautiful, ethereal voice. Okay, then later in the adventure, you throw the harpies in. And you have the harpies singing that same melody that they initially encountered with the bards. So the party will be like assuming then, because you've set them up, that this bard group has somehow been re-encountered. And they'll be like, oh, hey, that's the bards with that cool elven singer lady who was singing with them. Yeah, we should go find them. But then flip the script, and now it's some harpies, maybe more than one. All right, so those are some encounter ideas, and very simple. I want to get into the mindset of a harpy. Harpies are not the brightest bulbs in the bunch. They have an intelligence of 7, so I don't think of them as coordinating some massive hunt or attack, but I do see them as creatures who nest and then kind of, hunt within a certain range of where they nest. That makes sense, like any basic creature. These monstrosities, however, are rooted in a myth. So remember that flavor text about the whole like elf god and the maiden who wanted to impress him and stuff. They're vengeful and full of rage, and they delight in the suffering and torment of others. Wouldn't it make sense then that they would have multiple traps? Not just like one pit where they lure people to go, multiple traps. So maybe there's a group and your party is mid-level. Maybe they're not first, second, or third level. Maybe they're like 4, 5, 6, 7th. And you want to be able to use harpies in a creative way, but not such a way where like this party of mid-level people could easily kill them, right? So maybe the harpies over time have learned that, they dig these multiple pits, or they have some like traps where, they lure people to go, and the trap triggers something that, fells a tree or something else, or maybe if it's in ruins, if it's in like a ruined castle, they have like a tripwire that pulls down, a chandelier or something to fall. And it's either a trap or a distraction, or in some way forces the party to split up, because these harpies are chickens. They would not, that's kind of funny that they're winged, but they're cowardly. So they're not going to try to take on a big party, but if they could split up the party or trap some of the party and then entrance the other ones, then they could work in coalition. So you could easily take the harpy and scale them up to maybe have 3 or 4 of them who are working and nesting in this area where the adventurers have blundered along. And then you can have a series of traps and a series of different harpies trying to lure the party. So maybe one harpy over here starts its song, and a few people fail their saves, and they start going towards this harpy. And then another harpy over here lures, another group of the people, but you have to have something to split them. So maybe there's a trap that shoots out spikes or a trap that pushes a torch down into a little trench full of oil to create like a wall of fire kind of to split the party. So again, I think that with an intelligence of 7, they're not going to be that strategically smart. They're not going to go hunting outside of their realm. But if this is their land and their domain and where they hunt, they may over time have set up multiple layers of traps. And I think in doing that, and then different ones charming other ones, they would snipe people off a little bit at a time. Here's another way that you could use harpies. there's always a cool way to get somebody to split off from the party, right? All D&D players should know, never split the party, but there's always that one person in your group who likes to split the party. So this is a way to reward them, punish them, for splitting from the party all the time, right? So you easily can convince them by having someone else who isn't a Harpy, who is in this area, who uses the Harpies to get their job done. So here's an example, okay? Suppose that you have some kind of a tricksterish person, a changeling, a dryad, basically any creature who could kind of disguise self with the spell, or polymorph, or any kind of changeling kind of creature, a creature who can shift their appearance, and they appear as like something that would lure, or someone that would lure one member of the party away to chase it, right? Maybe they even have an action where they encounter the party and they seem friendly, and then they pickpocket and they take off, and they have a higher movement speed, right? So now some of the party goes to chase them because they just stole something important from the party. But this little sneaky person, whatever you decide to use, has been living in this area long enough to know that if he or she or it can lead, if they can lead some members of the party away, they know how to lead them into the area where the Harpies live. And then they put wax in their ears and a scarf over their ears so that they have a better chance at saving against the Harpy themselves. And they go and they hide. So then you got these people chasing the little sneaky trickster person into right into the Harpy's lair, okay? And the tricky, sneaky person knows that if the Harpies defeat these people and eat them, the tricky, sneaky person knows that while they're distracted, he, she, they can go to the Harpy's lair and steal treasure. So it's kind of like, this person's using the party as bait for the Harpies so that they can get their own treasure, get their own scam on. So it's like another layer, adding in another layer of one monster using another monster, the Harpies, to get something done that they couldn't normally do. Even if it's not something super, supernatural, maybe you just have a really clever and tricksy kind of like forest gnome or halfling who is smart enough to outsmart the Harpies, but not tough enough to take on a big group of people. So he lets the Harpies do the work for him. Not that they have an agreement, like the Harpies are still a threat to him, but he's been smart enough to figure out how to avoid their song by putting wax in his ears or whatever. Maybe he's a spellcaster, and maybe he has the silence spell, so he casts it around himself and then, waits it out in his special hiding place or his tunnel while the Harpies do all the attacking. So just another kind of an easy way to take a little encounter and add a little more story to it. I guess in closing, on a personal note, I'm not against the entire 5th edition backstory and mythology with regard to the elves. I could see how that could be very beneficial for like a newer DM who's kind of thinking about how to make this creature more important. And I suppose if you wanted to stick with that storyline, you could very easily make the Harpies into, from an encounter into more of an adventure. And maybe the characters actually find out that one of their, maybe somebody in the party is an elf who finds out that somebody from their bloodline was actually related to, the initial bloodline of that elf who became the first Harpy. Almost like when you take vampire lore and we're going to trace it all the way back to Dracula, or if you play World of Darkness, we're going to trace the bloodlines of the vampires all the way back to Cain. Maybe this progenitor of the Harpy line is somehow related in elven blood to one or more members of the party, and they therefore may have a vested interest in seeking if there's some way of redemption to save the Harpies from this horrible fate. That's a stretch. You got to be a dedicated DM to want to take that much of a campaign and make it part of this. But if your players have buy-in, then you try it. You can even engineer it, create the encounter, maybe have some kind of ancient stone tablets, and the players read Elvish, and it's older, like ancient Elvish, but they kind of can still read it, and they find the lore, and they find out about the history of the Harpies, and then in the names is where they discover that that's their family name. So it's kind of like you put it into their plates, like here's the information after defeating these Harpies and raiding their lair, you find these tablets that basically tell their history, which in the reading you discover that it's linked to your Elvish characters. What do you do? They might be like, screw it, whatever. Or, oh, that's just interesting. Or maybe they take the bait and they want to run with it, and now they start researching like more into the mythology of the Harpies and the arcana related to it, and if the curse can be reversed, that kind of stuff. And that could lead to a whole campaign. So, or if you're like me and you're like, I don't need all this elf stuff, I just want to use Harpies as horrible, cruel, vindictive, cowardly chicken lady bird creatures that like to eat people, then do it that way and use it as you need. But I will say that this is one of those ones where having a little context between different editions really does show how these things sometimes change. I think the biggest thing most obviously is the DC on the saving throw against the song. And you know what? If you're a DM and you decide that you want your Harpy encounter to be a little harder, then throw it back to the old school. Instead of a DC 11, make it a DC 15. Maybe you have one queen Harpy and 4 Harpy minions, and that queen is DC 17 because she's old and she has developed great power of song or whatever. Or maybe her song doesn't carry for 300 feet, but if they get within 100 feet of the queen's lair, then it's a DC 17, almost like giving her a lair ability. Now, does that make this harder? Yes. But if you want to use Harpies with mid or high level, then you have to scale it up, which means greater quantity, more hit points, or more effective powers. So anyway, I hope you guys got some interesting factoids out of this episode, and hopefully you guys may have used Harpies before, or you may be considering using Harpies. But if you have used them and you have any kind of clever, funny stories that you'd like to share, or just interesting ideas for how you could use them, don't forget to comment below. And as always, please make sure that you like, subscribe, ring that little notifications bell. And we'll see you for the next Monster Monday. Thank you.